Last week in session one, we started out really answering the question, why me, God? Why do I find myself in this predicament? I'm in between jobs, I'm unhappy in my work, or I've been laid off and I don't know what to do next. And we tried to answer that question, both practically speaking as well as scripturally speaking, in terms of where we are and where we're going and how we found ourselves in this predicament. And some of you will remember we wrote some letters that we then took out and we sacrificed in a fire outside. Thank goodness we didn't catch anything on fire, including the building. But we sacrificed those letters, gave those things up to God. And tonight we want to move one step further to your next job in a session that we call Stretching Your Dollars. How does one really prepare for a job search? And financial preparation is part of that. How can one not worry about the finances? And how can we estimate how long this search is going to be? Is it going to take a month or 2 months or 2 years? How long will it take us to find that next job? And then how can we plan to survive financially and otherwise during that period of time? And is there any way then we can develop plans to get through this? Even in this economy, several things can be done to shorten your job search, and we're going to be talking about some of those this evening. I just love this scripture verse as sort of a foundation for this evening's lesson. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. It's out of Proverbs chapter 21, verse 20. In the house of the wise, stores of food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. It reminds me, part of the story that we talked about last week, where as Joseph discovered when he was the prime minister of Egypt, they had to store up a lot of stuff during times of plenty because they knew there would be time of want, there would be a time of famine, and let's store all this stuff up so that when things turn sour, when the economy goes bad, we won't all starve to death. And the wise people do that, even in today's world, even in this country, even in this year, in those times when we do have an income and there is plenty, we need to make sure that we're storing up because we're going to go through those down times, those down periods. That's what we're going to be in part talking about this evening. In this session, we're going to be doing two basic things. First, we're going to estimate the length of your job search. We're going to take you through a step-by-step process, and I'll warn you right now, for those of you that have your materials with you, you're going to want to turn a few pages to the right, and what you're going to want to do is find handout 2.1 right behind the discussion questions in this section. We're going to be walking through that handout in a second. And then once we estimate how long your search will be, 6 months, 6 weeks, 2.5 years, whatever it may be, then we're going to talk about some strategies that we can employ so that we can survive during that period of time, regardless of how long it is. And those are the two basic things that we're going to do tonight. If you found handout 2.1, it's called the Length of Search Calculator. There are 14 factors that we're going to work through in this particular handout, and it should be the first page after the discussion questions in this section. Now, there's always a little bit of confusion that goes through working through this exercise, and so we're going to go through this step by step, and I'm going to try and explain each step along the way as we work through this. And if you miss any step, you're not going to have a good number at the end, and the objective here in this 14-step process is for you to end up with a fairly good guesstimate in terms of how long your length of search is going to take you from tonight going forward. You'll notice as you look at this calculator, there's a step 0 up above. I'll explain that in a second. And then running down the left-hand side of this, we go through factors 1 through 14. And you'll notice that factor 1 actually has 3 parts. I'll be walking you through each of these steps. And then as you look out to the right on this form, you'll see 3 additional columns. There's a column where you can add something. There's a column where you could subtract something. And that third column out to the right is where you're going to end up with a new total. Now, what is that something I'm referring to? I'm referring to the number of months that it takes you to land your job. You see, each of these factors that are on here actually have an effect on how long your job search is going to take. These are factors that influence whether you'll be getting your next job sooner or later than other people in the room that might be looking for the same job that you're looking for. Some of you are going to take more time, some of you less, in some measure, dependent upon these 4 factors and how they impact your life and how your life is impacted by them. So as we work through this, we're going to be adding months, we're going to be subtracting months, and at the very end of this exercise, you'll have in months the number of months that we can estimate your length of search to be. Now, let me just say this right up front. We've walked thousands of people through this exercise, and I find this amazing, and I helped author this. I find this amazing that this is as accurate as it is. Clearly, I want you to understand that these have positive and negative effects on how long your search will take. Positive in the sense that some of these factors can help shorten it. Negative in the sense that some of these factors can lengthen how long your search will take. And whether you consider that longer or shorter or positive or negative, the point is this. I'm amazed at the end of the process how close this gets for so many people when they come up to me after tonight's session and they say, you know, Dave, this says I'm going to take 11 months to find my next job. I can't take 11 months to find I can't survive that long. Maybe true. But wouldn't you like to know it's going to be 11 months now instead of 9 months from now? And this is what I see with many job seekers. They're amazed month after month that they still haven't found work. If they sort of had an idea going in, not only how long their search is going to take, but what are some of the factors that are affecting the search? Because see, most of the factors on this page are controllable by you. You can have an effect on many of these factors, and we'll be talking about that as well. So you have within your control, to some degree, the ability to shorten or lengthen your job search, depending upon some decisions that you make in the process. So let's get ready to go. Now let's start with step 0. Step 0 is based upon an old adage. This is decades old. This is something that I've heard literally almost since I've been in the human resource function. And there's so much truth to it today, so we're going to live with this old adage to start out. It says, divide your expected annual salary by $10,000 to calculate your basic length of search. Now, what does that mean? Let me translate that for you. Let me put that in English. What that means is, on average, I'm going to be using that term a lot, on average. There are going to be some that are higher, some that are lower. But on average, it says that for every $10,000 of annual income that you're expecting in your next job, it's going to take you about a month to find that job. Or a quick example, easy math. If you're looking for a $50,000 a year job, on average, it's going to take you about 5 months to get it. Everybody do that math? 50,000 divided by 5 months, 10 months, 6 months, but divided by $10,000, you're going to give you the number of months. So what you need to do is you need to come up right now with a projected income that you're going to be looking for in your next job. And I want you, let's say you're looking for a job that pays about $60,000 a year. I'll have you all yell out. How many months will a $60,000 a year job on average take? 6. Oh, you guys are great mathematicians. This is going to be easy. So you figure out first what your annual income target is in your next job. And yes, you can write this in pencil and change it later. And then I want you to divide that by $10,000. If you're looking for a $35,000 a year job, how long will it take you to land that job? Thank you, 3.5 months. I heard somebody in the back sitting back there with the calculator, just plugging that in real quick. Good. About 3.5. Now, you can use half months if you want to. I don't care. It doesn't matter. You can round to whole months. You can round up. You can round down. It doesn't make any difference. This is a guesstimate. There's nothing that scientifically proves that every number that you end up with is going to be absolutely. But you'll see how this works as we go, and you'll be amazed when this process is all over. So you need to have a starting number in that upper right-hand box on this form before we can even do step 1. So everybody plug in their starting number, their basic length of search. Because once we get our basic length of search based upon your income target, we're going to see, as you can see, we're going to walk through these factors 1 through 14, and we're going to be adding and subtracting months. And on some of these factors, you'll be perhaps even adding and subtracting in the same factor, because some of them have multiple measures that we'll be using. So has everybody got their starting point? Looking for a nod. Everybody got their starting point? Somebody going, no, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. Just poke your neighbor and tell them that you need some help, okay? Let's start with the personal factors. Now, the personal factors, there's actually 3 of them, personal factors. And I like to say that the personal factors are things that you can't change about your job. This is one of the factors you can't change. Now, I realize that if you're going through a sex change operation, clearly you can do that, but probably not in time to impact this job search. So we're going to eliminate that probability or possibility. So we're going to talk about your gender, male or female. We're going to talk about your ethnicity, your race, if you will, and we're going to talk about your age, but we're not going to talk about your age in terms of the year. We're going to use age bands, 10-year age bands, and you'll see how this works in a second. And you'll notice that next to these factors, you're only going to be able to add months. In other words, if your gender isn't good, what does that mean, Dave? I'll define that in a second. If your ethnicity isn't good, bad term. If your age isn't good, you're going to be adding months down here. Now, let's dispel this good or bad thing right up front. That's the reason I use it. I'm not going to be, I may use a word, but if I do, it's inappropriate. The correct is the norm. If your age is not the norm for that $10,000 a year, you're going to be adding months. On some of the other factors, you're going to be adding or subtracting. On some of the other factors, you're going to be subtracting only. Let's use our first example, gender. If you are a male, you are considered normal for this exercise at $10,000, 1 month for every $10,000 in earnings. Or to say that another way, it takes females a little bit longer to land the same job, the same identical job, with the same identical background than it takes males to land the job. Now, is there anybody that would suggest that's fair? And don't raise your hand. No, it's not fair. We're not up here to talk about what's fair. What we're trying to do is represent what's going on out in the marketplace, what's going on in the real world. And clearly, even today in our enlightenment, it's taking women on average, and ladies, what you can do, if you are a female, I want you to put a +1 in that box. You're going to be adding a month. So let's say that you started out, again, I want to use a simple example. You're looking for a $50,000 a year job. You started out with 5 months. If you and your neighbor next to you, male, is looking for that same $50,000 a year job, all other things being equal, and we know they aren't, but if they were, on average, it's going to take you 1 month longer to land the same job as it is to your male counterpart. Is that fair? Absolutely not. It's extremely unfair. It's extremely unnecessary. But that's the way the world, unfortunately, is working even today. So, ladies, you can add a month in there. Now, let me quickly go to race, ethnicity. If you are Caucasian in this exercise, you're just going to put a 0 in there. You're considered the norm in this particular factor. This $10,000 each month for $10,000 was built around white Caucasians, white Caucasian males. So if you are not Caucasian, if you are African American, American Indian, if you are of Asian descent, if you are Alaskan, if you are American Indian, if you're a non-Caucasian ethnicity, you can add a month. Now, what have we said so far? If you're an African-American lady in the audience going after that $50,000 a year job, you're already up to 7 months. We're still on factor 1. Because on average, it's taking non-whites about a month longer on average to land the same job as it is. Now, is that fair? Absolutely not. It's not. Now, let's go to the age thing for a second. The age is a little bit more complex. We're going to be using several age bands here, so I want you to hang with me for just a second. We're going to be talking about types of jobs, and we're going to be talking about age bands for those types of jobs. So let me go through this, and if anybody needs me to go back through it, just do one of these. Give me a hand signal, do one of these, and I'll go back through it, okay? Here we go. If you're in a good age band, let's say that you're looking for a senior level position, like a president's job, a CEO job, a senior vice president, a general manager job in a company. It's oftentimes referred to as a C-level executive position. If you're looking for that level position, the best age band to be in for that level position is 40 to 50 years old. If you're looking to be a CEO somewhere, like our friend Fred was a CEO in his previous job when he first came into our ministry. He was looking for that CEO level job. The ideal age band to land that position in the business world today is between 40 and 50 years old. Now, does that mean that 30-year-olds don't become CEOs? Doesn't mean that at all. Just means that on average it takes them a little longer to get it. Does that mean that 65-year-olds don't become presidents? Not at all. All the time they do. But on average, it takes them a little bit longer. Companies, if they could pick for age, and many companies would like to be able to, even though it's not particularly legal, the ideal age band for senior level management people would be in that 40 to 50. So if you're a senior level candidate for job and you're in the 40 to 50 age band, you're going to be putting a 0 down there. You're neither going to add nor subtract. But if you're a senior level candidate and you're younger than 40 or older than 50, you're going to be putting plus 2 months. You still get the job, it's just going to take you a little bit longer. Let me move further in this age thing. Let's say you're looking for, sometimes this is referred to as a middle management position. Some people call it upper management to be distinguished from the C-level executives, the top folks. But I want to refer to it as a middle management. These are directors, managers, supervisory people in many organizations. And the best age band for that kind of job, you'll see the overlap here, is 35 to 45. So if you're looking for that middle management kind of job, and you're in the 35 to 45 age bracket, you're going to be putting a 0 down in that box. If you're outside of that age band, you're going to be adding 2 months. Well, let me move on to the next level. Let's say that you're looking for an entry-level professional job. It might be an accounting job. It might be a middle-level IT job. It might be a school teacher's position. It might be a white-collar administrator's job in either the private or the public sector. It's a white-collar job. Oftentimes these require a college degree or equivalent experience. They're not in any heavy supervisory role, but they have a significant professional designation that they're looking for. And the best age band for that level job is 30 to 40. Does that mean you can't get that job if you're 25? No. It means people get in there all the time that way. How about 55? Yes, 55-year-olds are landing those jobs too. But on average, it's taking them 2 months longer. So if you're outside of that age band, add 2 months. Now, let's assume that you're not searching for any white-collar or management-level jobs. 0, zip, no white-collar jobs. I don't want you to worry about age. Now, is there an age impact? Yes. If you're over 50 and you're looking for one of these non-management, non-professional jobs, if you're over 50, add a month. Because unfortunately, when you cross over that age, it does make it a little bit more difficult to land that job. But other than that, if you're looking for a blue-collar position, a non-managerial, non-supervisory, non-professional, non-degreed kind of position, then all you have to worry about is nothing as long as you're over the age of 18 and under the age of 50. Is there some slight effect? Yes, but we're not going to split hairs with months and half months and half of half months and that kind of thing. All right, I hope everybody's clear on factor number 1. If not, I want you to catch me when we get into our question and answer session at the end. I want to move on to factor number 2, which is your work experience. They're not all as complicated as that age thing we just went through. Work experience, this one has a little bit of complexity to it in this sense. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 scenarios. If you don't fit any of these, I'm going to repeat them, and whatever one best fits you. If none of them fit you, then you're just going to put in a 0 and not carry anything forward. If you've worked for just a few companies, and by few, I'm going to suggest 2 or less, okay? If you've worked for a few companies. Now, let me make that 3. If you worked for 2 or 3 companies, you're going to be the norm. I want you to put in a 0 in this box. But write it lightly, because there may be some other things I have to say that might cause you to put a number in there, subtracting or adding. If you've had an uneven career path, now this is the way I want to describe the uneven career path. I need a little graphic representation here. If you've had work experience which has been uneven in this sense, you had a job with this level of responsibility, and then you got promoted up to this level of responsibility, then your next job was this level of responsibility, then your next job was a nice job like this, and then your next. In other words, if your career path has been one of these deals, I call that an uneven career path rather than just nice, easy progression, continued salary growth, continued responsibility growth, and so on. If it's been uneven, I want you to add 2 months. If you've only worked for small companies, a small company by our definition in this exercise is revenue under $100 million. So if you've worked for small companies, or, well, let me give you that one first. If you work for small companies, add a month. If that's all you work for, small companies. No big deal, it's only small. Let's say you only had short stays with your companies. And by short stays, I mean under 2 years. Maybe you worked for 3 or 4 companies, and they've all been relatively short. 18 months here, 16 months here, 9 months there. Short stays in the companies, anything where they've all been under 2 years, add another month. Now, let's go one more. Let's say that you only worked for one company. I know people in the audience, as I'm looking around here, I know some of you that work for one employer for 20 or 25 years, 30 years. You only work for one employer, add a month. Now, I'm not going to ask you why that is. Let me just give you the quick answer. The quick answer is the reason that your search can take a little bit longer if you've only worked for one organization is, and again, this can vary based upon the target job that you're looking for, but if I can overgeneralize for purposes of this exercise, if you only work for one organization for 15, 20, 30 years, it means you've typically only learned one way to do things. And there may be 10 or 20 or 50 ways to get some of these work processes and procedures accomplished. So you don't have as broad a work background, very deep at 20 or 30 years, but not a broad enough background for some employers. So that can have a little bit of an impact in terms of lengthening your job search. If you've worked for a Fortune 100 company, and if you have, you know it. They were always telling you that they were a Fortune 100 company. From the time you interviewed and hired in, your new hire orientation, and probably 10 or 20 times a month after that while you were working. You worked for a Fortune 100 company and had a substantial stay. If you were at that company for more than 5 years, you can subtract 2 months. If you're at the Fortune 100 company and you were only there for 3 months, 3 years, this is Fortune 100 company and you were there more than 5 years. Now, I don't know if all of those apply. Let me go back through them again. If you only worked for a few companies, neither add nor subtract, 2 or 3. Had an uneven career path, add 2 months. If you worked for only small companies, add a month. If you had short stays, meaning less than 2 years with your employers, add a month. If you only worked for one company, add a month. If you worked for a Fortune 100 company for over 5 years, subtract 2 months. So some of you actually could have pluses and minuses in this same thing. Net that out, make sure you carry over your new total out to the right, and let's move on to the third factor, which is the demonstrated work and relational style. Now, the reason that we're saying this is demonstrated is the key word in this. This isn't the way you want to behave. This is the way that people know you to have behaved. This is about your past performance, not about your future intentions. Let me give you an example. If you are considered to be autonomous and independent as a worker, not in terms of how you want to work, but if we were to contact your previous employer and people that worked in your previous employment, would they say that you were a good worker, that you were responsible and worked on your own, you didn't need a lot of direction, you weren't particularly a great collaborator or team player, but you caused no problems, you did your job and you were kind of a solo performer? That's the norm in this exercise. You're going to neither add nor subtract. But let's say that you may be known by your previous employers as somebody who was very autocratic and controlling. You always had to be in charge. You always had to get your way. You always had to be the person that had things done the way they wanted to have them done, even if you didn't have the formal authority to have that position. If you're known as autocratic and controlling by your previous employer, and you'll know that, it's not going to be a secret, nor is it a huge negative, but it is going to add a month to your job search. So you can put that down. Now, if on the other hand, by your previous employer, you were known to be collaborative, a team player, democratic, you seldom made a unilateral decision, even when you were empowered to do so. You got the inputs of others. You got the feedback and the inputs and made it a consensus-building group kind of decision. If you're known as that team player kind of person, you can subtract 2 months. Now, the reason that is for whatever, however that may be appropriate in some jobs and less appropriate in other jobs, corporate America today, the American work ethic today is teamwork. We hear it all the time. We hear it in all kinds of organizations at all levels of the organization. So when you're known as a team player, you're going to, with all other things being equal, you're going to be presumed to be a little bit more desirable as an employee. So that's why we take a couple of months off for that. Carry out your new total to the right, and let's go on to our fourth factor, which is employment status. Yes, whether you're working or not can actually impact how long your job search is going to take. It's been demonstrated for decades, and it's still true today. If you're working and trying to find a new job, on average, it's going to take you less time to find the job than if you're unemployed. Now, does that mean if you're unemployed, you can't find work? Well, if that were true, 95% of the working Americans would never work again. Some of you would have been out of work for the last 15 years because that's when you lost your first job. No, you can find jobs when you're out of work, but on average, it just takes a little bit longer. If you were laid off and you're currently unemployed, you're going to neither add nor subtract. Put a 0 in there if you were laid off. It's very common today, not unusual today. But, and here's the but, if you were fired and you're unemployed, I want you to add a month. And there's a difference between being fired and laid off. Now, I want to make this distinction before you write in ink pen in this exercise. If you were told that you were laid off and you were fired, you're going to add a month regardless of what you were told. Now, well, Dave, what's the difference between being laid off and fired? They told me I was laid off. Well, if you were the only one in a company of 2,500 people that was laid off, you've been fired. They might have tried to soften the blow for you by calling it a layoff, and you can count on it being a termination, a discharge, or a firing, depending upon how severe a language you want to use. If you were the only one removed and then immediately replaced by they hired somebody else to do the work, you've definitely been fired. That was not a layoff. A layoff is usually a group of people, and it usually means, if not forever, at least temporarily, it's a reduction in personnel on the payroll, and a reduction then more than just 2 or 3 weeks. It's a significant period of time in most cases. So if you were terminated, fired, discharged, and you're out of work, add a month. Now, if you're currently working, whether you're in your permanent kind of job, or some of you I know have taken bridge jobs. Maybe it's not that $45,000 or $80,000 a year job that, to replicate what you had last, but you've taken a bridge job. At least you're working 35, 40, 45 hours a week somewhere. It's not the job that you're trying to find permanently, but you've been there for a while. You've got a regular income coming in. If you're currently working either in a bridge job or your professional choice, you can subtract 2 months. On average, it's going to take you less time to find work. Let's go to factor number 5. After you carry out your new total, let's go to number 5, which is your marriage and family status. If you're single, divorced, or a dink, you're neither going to add nor subtract. Now, does anybody know what a dink is? A dink, D-I-N-K, stands for dual income, no kids. That means you're married, both of you in the marriage are employed, and you got no kids. Dual income, no kids. If you're a dink, or you're single, or you're divorced, neither add nor subtract. If, on the other hand, you're married with children at home, you could subtract a month. Now, if you're single and you like it that way, I'm not advocating that you get married so you can save a month in your job search. Some of you may jump to that conclusion, but that's not the lesson here. The lesson is this. When you're married with children at home, and I've never seen anything to prove or disprove this, but there is a common belief amongst employers of all ages that when you have children at home, you're a more stable, a more safe, a less risky hire. See, I remember early in my career, my wife and I were both working. We were dinks, in effect. No kids, and I remember on more than one occasion when things got kind of rough in her employment or things got kind of rough in my employment, I remember us sitting down. We were young and quite frankly foolish on many things, but I remember us sitting down talking, you know what, why don't we both quit our jobs? Let's get a Volkswagen bus and we'll just drive around the country for a couple of years. We'll camp and we'll work some odd jobs so we can feed ourselves. We've saved up a little bit of money. We'll live in jeans and T-shirts. I remember I'm a product of the 60s, the 1960s, when a lot of folks were doing that because they thought that's the way the world should end up. My only point there is sometimes if you don't have the family, the mortgage obligation, the kids, maybe you aren't as stable as you are when you have those things. At least that's the belief of many employers. Let's move on after you carry over your total to the next factor, number 6, your self-promotion ability. This is how good you are at sticking your hand out and saying, "Hi, I'm Dave. Let me tell you about myself. I'm Dave. Let me tell you what kind of job I'm looking for." You can walk into a room like this, meet a handful of strangers, and feel very comfortable in some sort of non-egotistical, very appropriate self-promotion. You're not shy, you're not uncomfortable about introducing yourself to anybody and letting them know that you're in a job search and this is the kind of work you do. See, if you're somewhat reluctant to sell yourself, if you're somewhat reluctant to be a self-promoter, you're average. You're the norm. You're going to put a 0 in the column because most of the people in this room, most of the people in any room would fit that description. Most of us are not comfortable doing self-promotion for a whole myriad of reasons. If you ask a group this size, put your hands up if you would be real honest about whether or not you're shy. Most of the people who are shy wouldn't put their hands up. That's how shy they are. So self-promotion, Bill. If you're reluctant and do nothing about your, now you might admit to me tonight, yes, I'm shy, I'm going to put in a 0. Okay, but you're not done yet. If you're reluctant to self-promote and you say to yourself, "Dave, that's just the way I am, and I plan on staying that way," add a month. It's one thing to say that you've not been a good promoter and a good connector. That makes you average. But you have a negative impact by a month anyway if you're unwilling to get outside of that during this period of time that you're in a job search. So if you're reluctant, do nothing about it, add a month. Now, if you're not reluctant or you've somehow overcome any reluctance that you had, you're clearly in a minority in a room like this. In terms of your self-promotability, you can subtract 2 months. This has a huge impact on your ability to land work. The next factor is factor number 7. I want to share with you something. I know we have several in the audience that are sort of out of the same generation that I'm from. And I I always like to share this, just as kind of a quick mind break from this exercise we're going through. I've learned about a new exercise for people over the age of 50 in terms of perhaps becoming a little bit more healthy, a little bit stronger in their physical presence. And I learned this exercise and I want to share it with you. I just came across it when I went through my significant weight loss last year. Some of you don't know, I lost 75 pounds in about 5-6 months. I'm just a shadow of my former self. And I learned this exercise then. I learned that what you do is, and I guess this would work maybe to a lesser degree for those of you under 50, but clearly this is good for those of us over 50. If you get 2 5-pound potato sacks and you hold them out to your side for 60 seconds. You get to the place where you can hold your arms out with the potato sacks for 60 seconds. And once you can do that comfortably, then I want you to get rid of the 5-pound potato sacks, and I want you to get 10-pound potato sacks. And you hold those out to your side till you can do that comfortably for 60 seconds. You with me? And then what I want you to do is, I want you to put down those, and I want you to get 2 20-pound potato sacks where you can hold them out to your side for 60 seconds. And then finally, once you can do that comfortably, you graduate up. I want you to get 2 25-pound potato bags and hold those out till you can do that for 60 seconds comfortably. There's no sweat coming off your face. Your muscles aren't quaking. You're very comfortable holding those out for 60 seconds. Once you get to that point, start putting potatoes in the sacks. Some of you will get that tomorrow. That's the exercise. Actually, probably the better exercise we could be doing is an exercise for our faith. Let me tell you about that exercise, probably much more helpful for our health. Stay in God's Word, live with conviction about God's promises, and obey His commands. We'd probably be in a lot better spiritual health for sure. This whole health and physical presence thing, again, this is a little bit more complex, so let me walk you through this. If you make an average first impression, and you're going to have to make that decision, I can't define what an average, if you think you're just kind of an average Joe or an average Joanne, you make an average physical first impression when you meet people, you're just an average, you're the norm, you fit right in the crowd, you're neither going to add nor subtract, you're going to have a 0 in this box. If, however, you are overweight physically, and I'll let you define whether or not you think you're overweight, I just caution you, this is helpful to come up with a good calculation on this so you don't underestimate your length of search. But if you're overweight physically or you're emotionally weighted down, and being emotionally weighted down has just as significant impact as being physically overweight, you can add a month. If you make a poor first impression, if you have a poor appearance, I know a lot of people that don't think they make a poor appearance. Again, I'm going to ask you to be introspectively really honest about this. You don't have to admit this to anybody else, but if you make a poor physical appearance, or you have a negative attitude, and you know if you're a negative person, you've been told probably by more than one person, then you can add 2 months. If you're one of those people that are unfocused or past-focused, let me help you sort of understand that for a second. Underfocused and past-focused means this. If every time I ask you, what kind of job are you looking for, you tell me the job that you used to have, that's called being past-focused. Or I say, what kind of job are you looking for? And your answer is, and there's 100 variations of this, but it says basically, I don't have a clue what I want to do. That means you're unfocused. Focus means you know exactly where you're headed. So if you're past focused or unfocused about your next job, past meaning you don't really focus on your next job, you're still focused on the one you lost. We talked about that in our last session. If you're past focused or unfocused, add 2 months. If you make a good appearance and have a very positive attitude, you could subtract a month. And I'll go on and add this. If you're future focused, in other words, everything you think about is where you're headed and not where you've been. You've learned from your mistakes. I think of Pastor Jeff Wickwire's book from that church down in Burleson. As a matter of fact, he